Welcome back, friends. Let's begin our story, Wake Up in Paradise, by Janet Sawyer Peck. Prologue, The Hurricane. The howling wind sounded like a rushing freight train, drowning out the din of wailing sirens and cries of humans and animals in distress. The black sky parted rhythmically with bursts of thunderous fire illuminating the terrain. Bent trees, their trunks swaying in the gale force of the wind, the foliage blowing in the horizon and sweeping the ground, looked much like giants dancing madly in the wind. Along the shoreline, the tide rose in roaring waves, cresting above the trees and crashing over them, snapping the weakest structures, tossing them, proud and humble alike, into the raging sea, then receding to repeat the process. Mother Nature, in all of her vengeful fury, seems to have decided to annihilate all living things on this small island. Only the bravest dared to battle the elements of a tropical hurricane. Nevertheless, this night seemed to have infused bravely in many. Men crouching and moving, almost at ground level like primates, searched for the fallen and injured. The strong lights of four-wheeled vehicles lit a path amid the debris of broken and tangled vegetation. Feeble pinpoints of lantern lights probed under the wreckage of collapsed buildings. "Hey, over here, I need more light." The wind whipped the coarse cry away, but it had been heard, and lanterns converged on the man. "Give me a hand," a man bellowed. "I saw her shoe buckle shining. Near missed her. She's buried, that good." Working quickly, the men removed the leafy branches that covered the prone figure of a young female. Her face was obscured by wet dark hair, matted with congealing blood. Carefully, one of the men felt for a pulse at the base of her throat. "She's alive!" The man's nod, more than his words, conveyed the verdict. At a signal, one of the vans made its way to the assembled rescuers. Two men carefully arranged the girl's limbs to transfer her to the waiting stretcher. At the movement of her body, she issued a moan of pain. "Don't fret, we take you to doctor," one of the assisting men murmured to soothe her. He gently lifted the grimy locks away from her fluttering eyes. "We help you," he said. "Tate, see if you can tell if anything's busted." The younger of the two men rose to his knees and addressed the driver of the makeshift ambulance. "She acts like it hurts when we touch her." "I'm not a medic," the approaching man grumbled. "We got to get her to a hospital regardless of her condition." "You're the best we got," the other man argued. "You've been through this before. Just look her over." The man called Tate stooped to inspect the woman on the ground. He spread his gnarled fingers wide, and with precision they slid over the woman's body. He probed gently the head wound, crusted with blood and dirt. "I think all the blood is from the cut on her head there," he said, pushing himself up from the ground stiffly. He removed his cap to reveal short curls that shone like white wool in the glare of the headlights. "She may have some internal damage, but I didn't see any skin breaks except that one." "Won't know without x-rays," the man added, wiping the water from his face with his sleeve and seating his cap on his head again. "Watch her head and back," he cautioned, as the men stationed themselves to lift the woman onto the stretcher. "Simon," he barked at one of the men crouched, holding a lantern at ground level, to give his comrades maximum light in order to examine the woman. "Get her here in the middle. I can't bend and lift her. My knees will lock up." Chapter 1. Comes the Dawn. The deafening noise pounding inside her head and the piercing sound of a screeching horn was making the injured woman sick to her stomach. She tried weakly to move and felt restraining hands holding her. It hurt too much to resist the pressure. However, the woman managed to turn her head a little before the retching began. Gentle hands held back the long, wavy strands of rain-soaked red gold hair as the empty stomach heaved into a pan quickly placed at her head. "Miss, miss, can you hear me?" a voice kept asking. "Of course I can hear. Why don't you stop all that noise? Why is there so much noise? It's making me sick," the injured woman complained. She moved her mouth with the words, but the sounds came out as moans of distress, and she vomited again. Though her eyelids felt as if they were glued shut, the injured young woman opened eyes the color of murky green sea. She tried to focus them on blurry images. The bright light was piercing and painful, and immediately they snapped closed again. She lay listening to the sounds of activity around her, thankful that there was no longer the noise of the wailing horns that made her vomit. Somewhere near she could hear moans of distress and sobs of fearful children. A woman was praying loudly to God for mercy. Where was she? She wondered. Everything was so confusing. Her brief glimpse had not revealed anything that she recognized. Everything that she remembered had a dream quality. The black, foggy, wet place she'd been in, the horrible noise, the excruciating journey, as well as the painfully probing hands and strange-sounding voices attached to floating faces. "I will wake now from this nightmare," she promised herself, "and I will be at home." One of the voices in her dream had told her that she could go home when the doctors examined her. "I want to go home," she whispered weakly before blackness claimed her again. There was a dim pre-dawn light that filtered in from the row of ceiling-high windows that made up the outer wall of an enormous room when the young woman woke again, and it took several minutes of staring at a large potted plant for the woman to realize that she was not in a familiar place as she had hoped. Cautiously, the woman moved her head to get a better view of her surroundings. She rubbed her head where a dull ache throbbed as her gaze perused the room. There were people everywhere. Most of them were asleep on the floor, though some were on cots as she was. Tables had been placed against the walls to allow for more floor space to accommodate the makeshift beds, and several youths had made beds on the table, using their duffel bags for pillows and jackets for blankets. Somehow there was a strange, chaotic order to the scene, and the sleeping peacefulness had a calming effect on the injured woman. Wincing at the sharp pains the movement caused, the young woman managed to sit up and propped herself on her elbows to keep from falling back. Her body felt as if it had been run over by a truck and then dragged for miles. Every movement hurt. Carefully, the woman pressed her hands against her ribs, trying to find the source of her pain. "Are you all right? Can I help you?" a soft voice spoke from behind. At the sound of the woman's voice, she turned her head faster than she should have, and a feeling of dizziness swept over her. Slowly she lowered her head and held her temples in an attempt to steady herself. "No," she answered, looking up into the face of a pretty dark-haired girl. "I'm fine." Then she asked, "Where am I?" "This is the hotel dining room. They turned it into a shelter yesterday. Don't you remember coming here?" the girl answered. "It's all kind of hazy," she replied, although the truth was that her mind was a bewildered blank. "I know," the girl answered, smiling sympathetically. "The storm was terrible. My father and brothers were out there with the evacuation teams all night, and I was afraid for them. But this hotel is one of the oldest on the island and has gone through many hurricanes. The rest of my family came here for safety." "Your family?" "My mother, my aunts and cousins," the girl replied. She pointed in a direction across the large room, still speaking in a hushed whisper. Shadowy lines of fatigue around the girl's dark eyes made them appear huge in her small round face. "You all must be very tired if you all haven't slept," the injured woman whispered back. "What time is it anyway?" "I slept a little," the girl answered. "It's not 5 yet, but I woke a bit ago and saw you awake. I thought you might need my help." "I need the bathroom," the woman whispered gratefully. "I'll show you," the girl offered helpfully. The two young women crept silently past sleeping forms through a door that led into a hallway that revealed a large hotel kitchen beyond. No one was sleeping in there. Men in white aprons and caps were chopping vegetables and kneading dough as if it were any normal working day, as though a catastrophic storm had not just ravaged the island where the hotel stood. "They're preparing the breakfast for the hotel guests," the girls explained. "Well, what about them?" the woman asked, motioning in the direction of the makeshift dorm. "They will feed them too, don't worry. We are always prepared for the hurricane season," the island girl assured her. "This happens a lot?" the woman inquired. "No, my father told me this is the worst one in his lifetime," the petite angel of mercy answered with a smile. Arriving at the door of the restroom, the island girl courteously held it for a woman with a small, sleepy boy in her arms. Then the two women followed the pair into the room. Once inside one of the cubicles, the momentum that had carried the woman through the past minutes left her. A sudden feeling of panic gripped her. Her mind was a complete blank, and she did not remember anything except a place of a strange dream. In addition, she could not make sense of any of the images or words that were in this dream. Frantically, the bewildered woman focused on what she did know. She was in a hotel on some island that had experienced a hurricane storm the previous night. She could not remember her name, nor where she was, or why she was out in the storm during the hurricane. Perhaps the girl that she could hear conversing in some indecipherable dialect on the other side of the partition would tell her how she came to be hurt, she decided. The fact that she had been treated was evident. Someone had bandaged her head, and her lacerated legs and arms had been washed and painted with iodine. The woman turned her attention on the sad state of her grimy, mud-covered clothes. The sandals on her feet had multicolored, thin straps looped together in the front like colorful strands of tangled spaghetti, with an intricate metal buckle that looked like a fancy brooch one would wear on a sweater. "I have good taste in shoes," she decided. The trousers she wore were black and made of a thin, silky material that was torn in several places. One of the rents exposed the left leg from knee to ankle. The tunic, once white in color, now resembled a brown-stained rag. It was also ripped in several places, but the snags were small in comparison to the pants. The woman smoothed the wrinkled garment around her hips, hoping the fullness would hide the exposed areas of her body. There were absolutely no recognition of either owning or dressing in these clothes, nor, as she listened to the two women talking on the other side of the stall, could she even understand their words. With that realization, the weary woman covered her face with her hand and gave in to her rising panic, sobbing hysterically with tears streaming down her face.